Hey, welcome to Be Still with Dr. Anita. I want to welcome you back. This is the channel where we talk about the fusion of the best of mental health and psychology with the healing power of Jesus Christ. Today, I want to talk to you about a very important set of dichotomies, and that is relief versus restoration. When you are searching for an answer to how to cope and deal with rising emotions, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, discouragement, depression, do you find yourself reaching for solutions that provide you a relief from your symptoms or actually that restore you, restore your soul, and bring you closer to wholeness? It's an important question to ask yourself because by far, people tend to gravitate towards solutions that bring them relief. And that's because the symptoms that we experience when we are feeling overwhelmed and anxious and discouraged are so overwhelming themselves. We just want those bad feelings to go away because they take up so much space in our minds and they seem to consume so much of our lives. We just want the suffering to go away. And so what we do is we gravitate towards solutions that do make those bad feelings go away, but they go away only temporarily and they end up causing other problems. Some examples. Do you find yourself just trying to get through the day, getting to 5 o'clock so you can have your glass of wine or 2 or 3 glasses of wine? Do you find yourself reaching for alcohol whenever life gets too hard? Are you finding yourself reaching for alcohol just to escape, to make those bad feelings go away? Do you reach for drugs, whether they're legal or not? Is that what you do when the feelings get so overwhelming? Do you reach for food? That's my relief option of choice, I have to admit. When I gravitate towards sugar. I joke about it all the time, but it's really not a joke. I have a problem with sugar. That's what I gravitate towards when I am just feeling in a particular way, when it feels like I just need a break. And what do? I reach for some food, in particular, something sugary. Now, if we reached for things like carrot sticks and celery sticks and apples and oranges, it probably wouldn't be so much of a problem. That's not what you're going to go for if you're going to use food to try to make yourself feel better. And that really is the objective that we have. If you ever go over to Facebook and if you search for Dr. Anita, Be Still with Dr. Anita Facebook group, you'll hear me talk about this a lot in that group. We have a different set of goals than God does. Our primary goal is to make bad feelings go away. God is trying to conform us more and more closely to the image of his son, Jesus. We out of the chute have a completely different goal in mind. And so when the goal is only to make bad feelings go away, well, there's actually lots of ways to do that. Now, many of them aren't actually helpful for you. And as I suggested, they end up causing problems because you could see where continuing to rely on alcohol or drugs or food or even distractions. Like, do you find that you scroll a lot on your phone, on social media, just to pass time, just because you're bored or because you're trying to avoid something or just because you're wound up or you're overwhelmed or whatever? We do these things. And then what happens is they stop working at a certain point. And you know what we do when that happens? We do them more because it requires more of that in order to get the same impact. We kind of develop a little bit of a tolerance. This happens with alcohol, happens with drugs, and it even happens with food and distractions. It's not enough to just scroll on Facebook. Then all of a sudden you have to go to Twitter, and then you have to go to TikTok, and then you have to go to Snapchat. And then all of a sudden you're looking at things that you really shouldn't be looking on the internet at all. And then that starts to take a grip and can provide a sense of relief that's temporary. Now, here's the problem. From a mental health standpoint, the mental health world exists in this secular framework. which is not necessarily inappropriate, but it does come with consequences. Because of that, it means that the mental health field looks at you as the client in terms of your symptoms. And insurance companies drive this, by the way. An insurance company wants to know what are the patient's or the client's symptoms, because that's what's measured in order to determine whether a treatment option has been successful or not. And so they want to know, how depressed are you? And there's a whole list of criteria to find out how depressed you are. How anxious are you? What type of anxiety do you have? And are the symptoms of anxiety starting to abate as you go through the treatment with your therapist? So it's a symptom driven system. And in many ways, it has to be. If you're going to ask somebody else to pay for it, they need to have some sort of way of being accountable to make sure that, they're spending money on something that's working. So it's just a bad situation all around, because the problem is that you can have an alleviation of symptoms, but not actually feel better. So, for instance, you can take an antidepressant medication and find that it improves your sleep and that you get your appetite back under control, you have more energy, but you still don't feel great. The subjective experience of your life has not improved. So you still feel depressed, even though many of your symptoms may have alleviated with medication, for instance. But from the mental health standpoint, because it's secular and because it's evidence based, the evidence they look for is a relieving of symptoms, an alleviation of symptomatology. And when that's proven in scientific studies, that's all they really care about, because that's what is paid for. So, what that means is that you can, on paper, look like you're getting better, but kind of still feel like something's not better because you've had relief from your symptoms. And it may be from a source that's not necessarily harmful. It could be an antidepressant that really did alleviate a lot of your symptoms. And for some people, it does actually bring about a better mood as well. But for a lot of people, it doesn't. And that's why you see commercials on television these days about adding another medication to your depression medication, because that one depression medication just isn't cutting it for a lot of people. They may notice, according to scientific studies, that some symptoms are relieved, but people still aren't feeling better. Their subjective experience is still a one of distress, even if their symptomatology has gotten better. This is what's going on. And in the medical field, that's why people don't talk about cures for depression and anxiety. And it's very rare that you'll hear the word cure in the medical field as well. And that's because they can't say for certain whether something's been cured. That's why when you have cancer and you go through treatment, they talk about the cancer being in remission, not necessarily that the cancer was cured, because they don't know for 100% fact that every single cancer cell is out of your body and that you actually have been cured. It's in remission. It's been suppressed. They just can't find it. It doesn't mean that it's not there. And it's kind of the same thing with depression and anxiety. Your symptoms have gone away, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not depressed still. And that sounds strange, but that's why people don't talk about, oh, we can cure depression with these medicines, because you can't. You alleviate symptoms and you hope that along with that, people feel better. Their subjective experience is that they're happier and more content and more satisfied and more energized and more engaged with the world. But you might be surprised to find out that doesn't happen a lot. And again, the whole medical system also is built for people to find relief from symptoms. We just want people to find relief from symptoms in ways that are healthier versus unhealthier. So that's why we encourage medication in proper ways and in proper opportunities and in proper context. We very much encourage for people to go to a talk therapist, to find a counselor, find a therapist that you feel comfortable with, because that will help alleviate symptoms and help you feel better, hopefully, but not always. And it's still geared towards just relieving your symptoms. But let's look at what God has to say, because God for sure cares that your symptoms are so overwhelming. It's not that he's unaware of that. In fact, when Jesus started his public ministry, we find in Luke 4:18, the first thing that he did was he stood up in the synagogue and he preached from the book of Isaiah, chapter 61, verse 1, in which he said, I have come to declare the gospel, and I have come to heal the brokenhearted. That's you. God is intimately aware of the status of your heart. He knows exactly what you've experienced. He knows the extent to which it has impacted your life, and He has come to heal your broken heart. Heal it, not alleviate your symptoms. God doesn't come along and apply first aid. He heals, He restores. And there's a difference between finding relief versus finding restoration. Let me read a passage from the Bible, and we'll learn more about restoration. There's actually so many. And in many ways, healing your broken heart is about restoration. And that's Isaiah 61. If you are pure and upright, surely now He would rouse Himself for you and restore your righteous estate. Job 8:6. Ezekiel 16:53. Nevertheless, I will restore their captivity, the captivity of Sodom and her daughters. And that's not such a great thing to restore, is it? But God does restore things according to justice. Let's see. Amos 9:13-15. This is not a verse that you hear very often. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman will overtake the reaper, when the treader of grapes, him who sows seed, when the mountains will drip sweet wine and all the hills will be dissolved. Also, I will restore the captivity of my people Israel, and they will rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. They will also plant vineyards and drink their wine and make gardens and eat their fruit. I will also plant them on their land, which I have given to them, because our God restores, not just provides relief. There is a difference. But you, O mountains of Israel, you will put forth your branches and bear your fruit for my people Israel, for they will come soon. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you will be cultivated and sown. I will multiply men on you, all the house of Israel, all of it, and the cities will be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. Rebuilding, restoration. God talks about restoring your soul in Psalm 23. He restores my soul. He will restore things that aren't good for us either, if we pursue things that aren't good for us, according to His word. It's very important that you understand, what are you after? And in your humanity, you're after relief from symptoms. And I know, I pray for that for you, because the symptoms can be so overwhelming. But what you need is restoration, because that is where healing happens, not just finding relief from your symptoms. And you will only find that in Jesus. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, the mental health field is secular. They can't talk about this in this way. And that's a problem. I understand why it's that way, because the average therapist does not know who's going to come through their door. And it might be a Muslim, it might be a Jew, it might be an atheist, it could be a Christian. They don't know. And so they can't necessarily approach this with a Christian worldview. So I get that. But it's also true that restoration is found in Jesus. So what are we supposed to do? What are you supposed to do as the consumer of mental health services as you need them? You go and you find someone with whom you feel comfortable, with whom you have good rapport and can help you. And that will help relieve a lot of the symptoms and take the edge off of a lot of it. And at the same time, you pursue Jesus with all you have. You go and you find a local church, a Bible-believing church that's interested in healing, that wants to help you understand what Jesus can do. And you pursue healing in both ways, not just one. Now, the tricky part with healing in Jesus is that it's my belief, and I think that this is biblical, and it's just good sound theology. We can't be totally healed here in the natural. I don't know that it's possible. I would venture to say it's actually impossible. We are going to be healed totally when we are with Jesus. So the goal is, when you go through tough times and you feel very challenged, to learn more about God in that challenge, in that space. Remember, he's trying to conform you more and more closely to the image of his son, Jesus. And let him. Let him do that. Let him show you who he is in the midst of your pain and suffering, how you can rely on him, and how he will never let you down, and how he is faithful, and how he loves you, and he cares for you and cares about you. And in your struggles, and as you pursue Jesus, you will learn that more and more deeply. And in that moment, he can transform a little bit of your heart. And in that transformation, there's a tiny bit of healing that can take root and then grow and grow and grow. It takes time and it takes pursuit on your part in order to really access the healing available in Jesus. And the goal is to keep healing, not to get healed, because you're never going to get to a point in the natural where you are 100% whole. I don't believe it's possible. But you can be a lot more whole than what you are now. You can be a lot better than what you are now. And that's the goal, okay? To get better, to keep pursuing healing, more and more deeper and deeper levels of healing, because you get stronger in the process. And part of it is because you're allowing God to actually transform you. And how can you be anything but strong when it's the power of the Holy Spirit that you're allowing to do that transformative work on your heart, to teach you about who Jesus is and who he was when these terrible things happened to you. He wasn't some mean God from a distance hoping that, you would just figure stuff out yourself. No, no. You were made in his image. He loves you with an everlasting love. Find a qualified licensed mental health professional who will also care about you and work with you in that capacity, and at the same time, in a parallel fashion, pursue Jesus. Find someone inside your church who can help you in that pursuit. And above all else, learn how to be still and know that he is God. If you're interested in all of this, I have an upcoming Be Still 3-day women's retreat coming up starting on April 30th through May 2nd here in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to come, drop a comment. Maybe I'll put the link to the registration page. It is a time of education and information and retreat so that you can come and spend time learning about how emotional wounds happen, why all of this happens. Why is life so hard? Why have you been hurt? Why has your heart been shattered? And the psychological part to how you can start putting the pieces back, and the theological part, how you can learn to be still before the Lord, learning to understand what God means when he tells you to be still, because he doesn't mean what the world means. The world thinks about meditation, which is the Buddhist tradition, which is, as I mentioned in the previous video, that's what the mental health is all in on. But Buddhism is not Jesus by any stretch. And so you want to pursue stillness according to how God defines it, which means you need to learn what he means when he says, be still, when everything is falling apart. Be still and know that he is God. You'll have opportunities in the retreat to have quiet time, big chunks of time where you can pray, you can spend time by yourself, you can practice some of the strategies that I'll be teaching you that will help you learn about this biblical stillness and how you can pursue stillness before the Lord. I hope to see you there. I'll talk to you more about it in the coming episodes. But in the meantime, be well, be still, and always, always, always turn to Jesus.